Hey there, Drowsy Historian here. Tonight you're not an architect, you're not Imhotep, you're not a visionary mystic with secret knowledge of star alignments and sacred geometry. No, tonight you're a peasant, a nameless sunburnt cog in a machine, made of dust, rope and suffering. You didn't choose this job. You were told, and you obeyed. And now you're about to spend the next several years hauling limestone up a ramp until your spine gives out, or your breath does. Whichever comes first. Before your fingers are crushed under a sled and the flies take up permanent residence in your nostrils, do me one small favour. Leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from and what time it is. It's so fascinating to see who's tuning in from around the world. And if you'd like early access to more of these slow little nightmares, ad-free audio of the episodes, or just want to support the show, you'll find the Patreon link in the description. But for now, lie back, get comfortable. Let's begin. They didn't ask. They didn't need to. You're a farmer, and the Nile has flooded again, like it always does, drowning your fields beneath a layer of black silt and bureaucratic expectation. That means you belong to Pharaoh now. For a season at least, you knew this was coming. Everyone knows. But knowing doesn't make it easier when the men show up with tablets, lists and an air of bored authority, pointing at you like you're livestock overdue for slaughter. You pack what little you have, a rough cloak, a stale hunk of barley bread, and a water skin you're told won't be nearly enough. You kiss your children, if you have them. You don't bother saying much. There's no noble farewell, just the quiet resignation of someone who understands, in his bones, that he's being sent to die very slowly. The journey to the quarry is long, hot, and utterly silent. 100 other men trudge beside you, barefoot and hunched, already sunburnt before the second mile. No one complains. Complaining implies you expect someone to care. The overseers ride on donkeys, shouting at anyone who falls behind. One man stumbles too often and is left behind entirely. You don't look back. You don't ask what will happen to him. That kind of curiosity is a luxury, and luxuries are for people who aren't being marched across a desert to chip at rocks for a dead man's house. When you arrive, it's worse than you imagined, though imagination isn't really the issue anymore. You've seen quarries before, you just haven't lived in one. There are no homes, only sun-bleached tents made from scraps. No paved streets, just a chaos of mud, stone dust and boot prints. You don't see the pyramid yet. That's in Giza, still many miles away. Here your world is a pit in the earth ringed by crumbling cliffs and buzzing with heat, men, and the incessant groan of labour. It smells of unwashed bodies, wet stone, and desperation. You're herded toward a collection of blunt tools. Hammers, picks, copper chisels, already dulled to the shape of useless spoons. You pick one up, and it feels wrong in your hand, but there's no time to adjust. A foreman shouts at you to start working. So you do. You don't know the man next to you. He doesn't introduce himself. He doesn't look up. He just swings his tool at the rock wall with a rhythm so practiced it borders on religious. Thwack, scrape, grunt, bleed over and over. You copy him poorly. Your hands blister within minutes. You crack a knuckle by gripping too hard and flinch when the copper edge rebounds. The foreman yells at you to keep going. The man beside you mutters something that might be advice or a curse, but doesn't break pace. You return to the wall and keep hammering until your fingers stop listening to your brain. By midday, your palms have split open like overripe figs, and you've tasted your own blood 3 times. There's no shade, no mercy either. The sun pounds down like it's personally offended by your existence. Sweat doesn't cool you, it just makes the grit stick to your skin more stubbornly. You take your first real break around noon, sitting on a rock that's only marginally less hot than the one you're breaking apart. A small ladle of water is passed down the line, and you drink from it like it's a holy relic, then immediately regret not savouring it. The water is warm, metallic, and somehow makes you thirstier. Someone passes you a handful of coarse bread and pickled onions. You eat without tasting. The man beside you doesn't eat at all. He just stares at the rock face like it owes him something he'll never get back. The rest of the day passes like mud through fingers, slow, suffocating, and granular. Every hour feels the same. Strike, breathe, wince, repeat. You stop checking the position of the sun because it only reminds you how little of it has passed. At one point, a man screams. You don't look. The scream stops quickly, which usually means a limb is gone. If it had continued, it might have just been a crushed foot. You tell yourself, this isn't your business. You tell yourself that next time it won't be you. You don't believe it. By nightfall, your arms feel like sacks of sand strapped to your shoulders. You can't grip your tool anymore, not really. Your fingers are purple and stiff. You're told to drop it anyway. Day's done. The foreman marks something on a tablet, doesn't look at you, and walks away. You're not escorted to housing because there isn't any. You just follow the others to the nearest strip of semi-flat dirt and collapse. Someone hands you a scrap of cloth. You're not sure if it's a pillow or a bandage. You use it as both. There's no campfire, no songs, no camaraderie, only the sound of coughing, groaning, and quiet retching from someone who drank too much brackish water. You try to fall asleep, but your body won't stop twitching. The shock of labour still lingers in your muscles. You roll over. The ground is sharp. You roll back. Something squishes beneath you. You don't want to know what it was. Eventually, you stop thinking. That's when sleep comes. Not rest, just the temporary shutdown of a system that knows it's dying. Morning is worse somehow. Everything you did yesterday, you have to do again. Only now with injuries. Your hands are swollen and torn. Your legs scream with each step. The sun hasn't even risen yet, and you already feel like you're drowning in heat. The man beside you doesn't show up. Someone else takes his place without comment. You wonder if he died or just ran. Then you wonder if there's a difference. Then you stop wondering altogether. No one knows your name. That fact hits you somewhere deep. Not even the foreman knows it. You're just a tally mark, a shape in the dust with legs. You realise it's likely no one will ever speak your name again once this is over. Not even your family, if they're still alive. The only thing that will remember you is the rock. And it doesn't care. It never did. You've made it through your first 2 days. That's more than some manage. Your reward? More days, each one harder than the last. You haven't even seen the pyramid yet. But don't worry. You'll get there eventually. Or what's left of you will. You don't remember when the quarry ended and the hauling began. There wasn't a clear line. One day you were chipping at stone, and the next you were tethered to it. The block in front of you isn't shaped like anything yet. It's just a massive, uncooperative lump of limestone, roughly the size of a cow, and significantly less cooperative. It's wrapped in rope, like a gift no one asked for, mounted on a wooden sled that groans louder than the men pulling it. You're part of a team now, if team means 20 equally exhausted men, dragging something that wants very badly not to move. There's no beast of burden to help. You are the beast. The sled sinks into the ground with each inch it travels. The mud sucking at it like a dying man clings to breath. Your feet, already raw from quarry work, slip in the sludge left over from water poured to grease the path. It doesn't help much. If anything, it just creates new hazards, puddles to fall in, grooves to twist your ankle in, and the ever-present danger of being run over by the thing you're trying to deliver. The sun hasn't changed. It still presses on your back, like an open palm trying to shove you into the earth. You sweat until you stop sweating. That's when things get dangerous. The foreman walks beside the sled with a stick, not to help but to motivate. He doesn't speak. He doesn't need to. The stick does the talking. Thwack on a shoulder here, crack against a thigh there. Not hard enough to break anything. Just hard enough to remind you who's expendable. If you fall behind, someone else will take your place. Not out of kindness, out of necessity. The block has to move. Whether it does so over your body or without you is a matter of logistics, not morality. At some point someone slips, the line jerks, the man to your left yells and stumbles, his leg folding the wrong way under the weight of a block that does not care he exists. The team halts, briefly. 2 men drag him off the path while he screams. The others adjust the ropes, shift positions, and keep going. There is no moment of silence. No one checks to see if he'll walk again. The foreman doesn't even look up from his tablet. Somewhere behind you, the injured man's sobbing turns to silence. You don't know if he passed out or gave up. Either way, he's out of the count. You shift your grip and resume hauling. By mid-morning, the block has travelled less than a mile. Your shoulders are raw, the skin rubbed pink and peeling where the rope has eaten through your tunic. Your hands shake without your permission. You're given a few sips of water and a fistful of dates, which feel like a feast until you remember they're meant to last until sundown. You chew slowly, eyes half closed, trying not to think about the taste or the lack of it. One of the men retches into the sand. No one reacts. Vomiting is just another bodily function here, like sweating or bleeding. You pass a line of camels standing in the shade, watching you with what might be smugness. They carry lighter loads, grain, tools, sometimes nothing at all, and they don't walk unless coaxed. You, on the other hand, haven't stopped moving since dawn. You envy them their indifference. A camel can lie down in the sun and refuse to rise. You try that, and you'll be dragged behind the sled until the heat finishes what the foreman won't bother to start. Sometimes when the terrain gets rocky, wooden rollers are placed under the sled to help it move. These rollers are ancient magic, primitive, flawed and marginally effective. They work until one snaps in half or sinks too deep into the muck. When that happens, everything stops. The block settles in like a pig in a mud wallow. Then comes the real work, heaving, lifting, shifting, grunting. You put your back into it, you put your soul into it. You're not even moving stone anymore. You're moving time. It drags against you with every second. And then there's the sand. The endless, abrasive, omnipresent sand. It's in your hair, your nose, your ears. It's behind your eyes. It mixes with your sweat to form a gritty paste that scalds your skin. You feel it between your teeth, under your fingernails, in places you didn't know could itch. When the wind kicks up, the whole world becomes a blizzard of grit, blinding and biting. You try to protect your face with your arm, but you need your arms for hauling. So you squint and bear it. And when it finally settles, you realise you've inhaled enough sand to build your own miniature pyramid in your lungs. The men around you stop speaking by noon. The grunts and curses taper into dull silence. There's no point. Conversation takes energy. Humour takes energy. Even hatred takes energy. And energy is a currency you've long since bankrupted. You don't even think about the weight anymore. It's just pressure. Constant, immovable pressure. Like the hand of a god that doesn't love you, doesn't hate you, just wants you flattened into nothing. By late afternoon, the block has made it maybe 4 miles. That's a good day. You're told to leave it there. It will be someone else's problem tomorrow. You wonder if that someone will be you again. You're too tired to care. You drop the rope and immediately regret it. Your fingers don't uncurl. Your shoulders seize. You stand there staring at your hands, wondering how they became these trembling foreign things attached to your arms. One of the older men tells you to drink. You do. The water tastes like warm metal and desperation. That night, you don't eat. Not because there's no food, but because your jaw hurts too much to chew. You lie down where you stand, half on a stone, half on the ground. The blood from your rope burns has dried into your shirt. You don't bother peeling it off. Someone near you snores like a dying ox. Someone else coughs until they vomit. You ignore both and try to sleep. Tomorrow there will be another block, another rope, another mile of sun-baked misery. The stones always need moving, and as long as you can stand, so do you. You don't know how many days you've been hauling blocks. Time stopped meaning anything once the skin on your shoulders fused with the rope, and your thoughts began to taste like copper. The sun rises, the stone moves, and the sun sets. Sometimes a man collapses and is replaced. Sometimes you vomit and keep walking. Eventually, someone tells you to stop. Not because you're finished, there is no such thing, but because the block has reached its destination. You look up, and that's when you see it. It rises out of the haze like some impossible mountain, an angular monolith that doesn't quite look real, more hallucination than architecture. You've heard stories, vague rumours passed along dusty roads and muttered in half sentences around campfires. But nothing prepares you for the sight of the thing. Even incomplete, the Great Pyramid dominates the landscape like a stone god mid-gestation. It doesn't glitter. It doesn't radiate holiness. It just exists, immense, ancient, and indifferent. As you approach, a strange sensation settles in your gut. It's not awe, it's dread. You realise, with sharp clarity, that you're going to die here. The camp sprawls around the base like a festering wound. Tents, scaffolding, mud brick storage huts, rope lines, tool piles. It's a logistical nightmare, or a miracle, depending on your perspective. Thousands of people swarm the area, none of them standing still for more than a few seconds. You're led through the chaos by someone who doesn't bother to speak. He just gestures. You follow, dodging sleds, carts, oxen, and other labourers, as if you've been doing it for years. Everything moves with a terrifying rhythm. No conductor, no central voice, yet somehow in sync. Like a colony of ants with a shared death wish. The sound hits you next. It's not one sound, it's all of them. Chisels clinking against stone, ropes creaking, wheels groaning, men shouting orders in every direction, their voices competing with screams of pain and calls for water. Somewhere to your left, a man is wailing. You glance and see blood leaking from under a slab. He's pinned. Not dead yet, but it won't be long. No one rushes to help. Two overseers argue nearby, more concerned about whose team he was on than how to uncrush him. The work doesn't stop. No one steps out of line. The stone keeps moving, and so do you. Dust hangs thick in the air, a permanent haze that tastes like old bones and limestone. You try to wipe your eyes, but your fingers are crusted with grime, and the gesture only grinds it deeper. Everything is covered in the same fine coat of filth. The stones, the tools, the people. It settles into the folds of your tunic, your hair, your teeth. You haven't been clean in weeks, but this is different. This is the kind of dirt that becomes part of you. You cough and it comes up pale and dry, like your lungs have been repurposed as a quarry. You're not given instructions, you're not welcomed, you're not even acknowledged. Someone hands you a length of rope and points up the slope. That's it. Welcome to the machine. You stumble toward the ramp, massive, sloped and seething with movement. The blocks from the quarry are dragged up in teams, each one flanked by men like you, straining under the weight, their feet slipping on compacted dust and ancient sweat. The incline is punishing. Your legs start shaking before you reach the first rest point. There are no handrails, no guides. If the sled goes sideways, it'll crush everything in its path. You included. At one point, the man in front of you loses his grip. He doesn't fall far, just enough to knock his shin against the sled runner. The sound it makes is wet and wrong. He limps to the side, holding his leg, and is immediately pulled away by someone with a club and a very short temper. You don't see where he's taken. You don't ask. You just take his place and keep moving. The machine can't pause for one weak part. It must continue. It must rise. Higher up the ramp, the structure comes into brutal focus. Each block is precisely placed. Each layer slightly smaller than the last, forming a perfect, cruel geometry that seems to defy the chaos at its base. But now that you're closer, you can see the gaps, the unfinished edges, the makeshift scaffolding lashed together with rope and stubbornness. You realise this isn't a monument to godhood. It's a giant, over-ambitious corpse, a tomb that's still digesting the men who build it. You don't place blocks. That's someone else's job. You drag them, push them, guide them into place like an idiot midwife. The ones who do the final fitting are higher ranked, more skilled, or just lucky enough to have gotten here earlier. You envy them their relative stability. You also hate them for it. You hear one of them laughing. Not the joyful kind, the kind that's too loud, too sharp, like a mind that's been filed down to a nub and doesn't know it's bleeding. You understand that laugh. You'll be making it yourself in a few days. Breaks are rare. When they happen, you sit wherever there's space that isn't being actively crushed or shouted over. You drink what they give you and eat what's passed down the line. The beer is warm and sour, the bread dry and thick enough to absorb whatever spit you can muster. You try to ignore the buzzing of flies, on your food, on your face, in your ears. You swat them out of reflex until you realise it doesn't matter. There are always more. You will never win. From your resting place, you watch the overseers. They stand above the ramp on raised wooden platforms, shaded by thin cloths that barely flutter in the windless air. They shout, gesture, record things on tablets. Occasionally one of them points down at a team, and the foreman attached to that group responds by striking someone. You've already learned the signs. If they point at your team, someone is about to bleed. The question is whether it'll be you. You're starting to understand now. This isn't just a construction site. It's a living thing. It breathes through the thousands of men who drag the stone up its sides. It eats rope, wood, sweat and skin. It digests humans like grain, slowly, completely, without waste. You're not a builder. You are the material. The moment you arrived, you became a part of this structure. Not in memory or legend, but in bone and tendon. If you died right now, you'd be dragged off and replaced within the hour. The block would keep moving, the pyramid would keep rising, and not a single word would be spoken about you again. This is not a job. It is not even a punishment. It is a system, perfectly designed to function on the backs of people like you, who were born small and stayed that way. It doesn't care who you were. It only cares how much you can carry and for how long. The answer is always not enough. Tomorrow you'll come back to the same slope, the same stone, the same dust-choked scream of labour. And if you don't, someone else will. The machine does not mourn. It does not wait. It does not break. Only you do. You'd think the worst part of this job would be the work. It isn't. It's the rest. When the sun dips low enough that even the overseers can't see clearly, when the ropes are dropped and the sleds parked and the foreman finally stops shouting, then you're sent back to what they call the living quarters, which is generous. Living implies some kind of vitality, some hint of dignity or comfort. What you return to every night is a sprawl of half-collapsed tents and mud brick sheds, stitched together with string, sweat and blind hope. It smells like hot breath, rotting vegetables, and old wounds. If hell had barracks, this would be the prototype. You don't have a room, you barely have a space, just a patch of ground shared with a dozen other men whose names you mostly don't know, and wouldn't remember, even if you did. You sleep shoulder to shoulder with them, your limbs overlapping like driftwood after a flood. Every movement brings you into contact with another body. Someone's elbow, someone else's knee, the occasional groin in unfortunate proximity. It's too hot to sleep with a blanket, and too dangerous to sleep without one. Thieves move through the camp like rats, looking for anything that isn't nailed down or still breathing. There are no beds, just flattened mats, old straw, or bare dirt. You lie down and try not to think about the wet patch near your head, or the unmistakable crunch beneath your hip. The man next to you wheezes in his sleep. Another mumbles to himself, the words forming nonsense prayers to long-forgotten gods. Somewhere in the corner, someone is picking lice from his chest hair and clicking them between his nails, like seeds. The air inside the tent is thicker than outside, sour with breath and beer fumes. a fermentation chamber of human decay. You breathe through your mouth until that starts to taste worse. The latrines, if you can call them that, are long, shallow trenches dug into the dirt with planks laid across to squat on. You're told not to linger, but you do anyway. Not because it's pleasant, but because it's one of the only places where you can be alone for 30 seconds. The stench could kill a lesser man. It almost kills you daily. The flies are so thick they seem to have mass, and they don't scatter when you swat at them. They know you're bluffing. Sometimes the trench floods from runoff, or a poorly timed downpour. Then it becomes a swamp. No one drains it. You just shift the plank a few feet and carry on. Meals are communal in the loosest sense of the word. You line up with the others, holding a chipped bowl or a cracked plate, and wait for someone with marginally more authority to slop food into it. The menu never changes. Sour beer, stale bread and onions. Always onions. The bread is so dense you could use it as a building material, and maybe someday they will. The beer is cloudy and smells faintly of something that died a week ago. You drink it anyway. It dulls the ache in your joints and, if you're lucky, the rest of you too. The onions are sharp enough to strip the lining from your stomach, but they're the only thing with flavour. Some men hoard them like treasure. Others trade them for better bedding, cleaner water, or a half hour with someone in the tents beyond the camp, where relief is sold like rope, cheap and fraying. Bathing is more theory than practice. There are a few basins near the wells, but by the time you reach them, the water is either gone or foul. You rinse when you can, splash your face, maybe pour a cup over your chest and call it good enough. Your skin is coated in a mix of dust, sweat, oil and blood. Some yours, some not. You've forgotten what clean feels like. You no longer expect to wake up dry. You scratch constantly. Not because you're dirty, though you are, but because your body is trying to shed itself in pieces. Rashes form in the folds of your knees and elbows. Blisters peel open, then seal with grit. Cuts that should have healed by now just weep slowly in the dark. Infection moves through the camp like gossip, fast, loud and ignored until it kills someone. A man with a swollen leg drags himself to the work line anyway, because not showing up means punishment, and punishment might be worse than whatever is eating his flesh. Another develops a cough that never leaves, a dry, hacking bark that shakes the tent and makes people edge away when they hear it. One night, someone's foot turns black. The next morning, he's gone. No one asks where. You learn not to ask. You also learn not to look too closely at your own wounds. Denial is cheaper than medicine, and just as effective. There's talk that this life is better than most. You've heard it from overseers, from priests, from men who haven't lifted a block in their lives. They call you privileged, a state worker with rations and shelter, a man contributing to the eternal legacy of Pharaoh. You try to believe them, just for the comfort of it. After all, you're not a slave, not technically. You're paid in food and beer and promises. And if that doesn't feel like enough, maybe that's just a flaw in your character. Maybe you're not grateful enough for the opportunity to rot slowly in a sacred pit. The only entertainment is sleep, and even that feels like a gamble. You dream in brief, fevered bursts, sandstorms, falling stones, your mother's voice warped by heat and distance. Sometimes you dream of home, but never vividly. The details have started to fade. The faces are blurs. The voices are hollow. When you wake, it's like surfacing from a tar pit. Your back cracks. Your mouth is dry. The man beside you is still snoring through a broken nose. Someone farts. Someone else coughs blood into a rag. And the day begins again. This is home now. A ditch full of strangers, swarmed by flies, soaked in sweat, choked with dust and disease. You live here. You will die here. You've been told it's generous. You've been told it's holy. You've been told it's your duty. You don't know if any of that is true, but you do know one thing. You smell like a man already halfway buried, and no one notices. There are no secrets here. No ancient alien technology. No lost knowledge passed down by star gods. Just pain, repetition, and a handful of tools so simple they might as well be children's toys. Your job, your glorious task in the service of Pharaoh's eternity, is to move rocks the size of oxen, using ropes, wood, leverage, and whatever strength hasn't yet been beaten out of you. The process is as old as misery itself. And no, you don't get to invent anything. You're not the innovator here, you're the application. The first thing you learn is that stone doesn't care. It doesn't care about your muscles, your timing, your enthusiasm, or the shallow myth that this is noble labour. It has one job, to resist, and it performs it perfectly. Your tools are copper chisels, barely strong enough to dent the larger blocks. They dull after an hour and bend after 2. You spend more time sharpening them than using them. The sharpening stones are communal and overused, worn slick by generations of men who tried, failed, and bled all over them. Your mallet is wood, splintered at the grip, stained with old blood that might be yours or someone else's. It makes no difference. You spend your mornings driving wedges into cracks, dry wooden wedges, carefully tapped into pre-scored lines, then soaked with water until they swell and split the block along its fault. It's satisfying when it works, when the rock gives with a groan and a snap, as if admitting defeat. Most of the time, though, it doesn't. It just sits there, mocking you. You tap, you pound, you whisper threats. Then the wedge breaks, or the chisel slips, and you lose a thumbnail trying to adjust your grip. Someone shouts that you're too slow. You don't answer. You're too busy picking gravel out of your palm. Levers are your next best friend, and also your most reliable enemy. They're crude wooden poles, wedged under the edges of blocks to tilt and shift them an inch at a time. You work in a group, one man pressing, another stabilising, a third watching the angle. It's a dance if dances usually ended in compound fractures and screaming. If the lever snaps, it'll catch your shin, your ribs, your teeth. You've seen men lose fingers between stone and fulcrum. You've seen hands pinned and left there for too long. The only thing more terrifying than lifting a block is realising you now have to lower it again without dying underneath. Ramps run through everything, massive spiralling pathways of packed earth and loose stone, held together by sweat, willpower, and physics that only half work. The ramps are the arteries of the pyramid, and you're the clot trying to push your burden uphill. You drag blocks with ropes that cut deeper than any blade, guiding them over rollers or wooden sleds that warp with heat and buckle under strain. You scream at the men ahead to slow down. You scream at the ones behind to push harder. No one listens. Everyone's too busy keeping their feet or trying not to vomit. Sometimes, when the ground is especially uneven, you pour water in front of the sled to reduce friction. This works in theory. In practice, it creates a film of mud that sends men skidding into stone, their bodies crushed between the block and the ramp wall. You once saw a man flattened that way. One moment, he was there. The next, he was pulp, leaking into the dust. No ceremony, no prayer, just another lesson in geometry. You learned not to stand too close after that, not because anyone warned you, just because it happened. Blisters come fast. They bubble up after the first day of tool work and pop by the second. You ignore them. There's no point bandaging what will just reopen tomorrow. The exposed skin hardens, then cracks, then hardens again. Calluses build like bark, thick and ugly, until your hands look like they belong to a creature that's never seen comfort. Then infection sets in. The cracks ooze. You wrap them in rags that used to be part of your tunic. You tell yourself they'll heal. You don't believe it. You keep working anyway. The rope is worst. It's coarse, fibrous, and soaked with years of sweat and failure. It burns through your skin like sandpaper. If it slips in your grip, it takes part of your hand with it. If it catches on your arm, it leaves a welt that bruises purple, then green, then black. You learn to hold it just right, tight enough to control the weight, loose enough to let it slide when it needs to. It's a trick no one teaches you. You figure it out by watching someone else do it wrong and lose half their fingers. Every tool has a lifespan, and so do you. You begin to see yourself in the materials. You chip like the chisels, crack like the wedges, bend like the levers. You are the technique. Your pain is the process. You start to measure your worth in how many blocks you've moved, how many layers you've helped complete, not because it matters, because it's the only scale left. You don't have family here, you don't have a name, but you do have a tally, somewhere on a foreman's tablet, of how many stones you've helped suffer into place. You try to take pride in it. Some men do. They talk about Pharaoh, about the afterlife, about how this work earns favour with the gods. You don't know if you believe any of that. You don't even know if you care. But sometimes when the light hits just right and a block slots perfectly into its layer, flush and seamless, you feel something. Not joy, not satisfaction, just a brief, quiet moment where the world makes a kind of horrible sense. Then someone screams and the spell breaks, and you're back to adjusting ropes and praying the next lever holds. There's no innovation here, no comfort, no glory, just repetition, misery, and the gradual surrender of your body to a system that will not stop until it's claimed every usable part of you. The tools don't get better, the techniques don't evolve, the pyramid grows and you shrink. Every hour is a contest between mass and muscle, and the stone is always winning. By the time you lie down at night, your arms shake, your spine feels bent, and your hands are swollen stumps of pain. You fall asleep dreaming of ropes and angles and falling blocks. You wake up already sore, and when you pick up your chisel again, it feels heavier than yesterday, like it knows what it's doing to you. You wedge, you lift, you get crushed, again and again and again. By now, your hands are no longer hands. They're tools, blunt, blistered, bleeding instruments designed for gripping, dragging, hammering, and occasionally shaking without your permission. You understand the stone better than you understand yourself. You know its weight, its angles, the way it resists you, and the way it wins. Your body has adapted to the labour, if you can call breaking down adaptation. You no longer question the process. You are the process. But it isn't just the tools that shape you. It's the eyes. You feel them even when you're alone, watching, measuring, waiting for you to slip. You've learned how to hold the chisel, how to haul a block, how to scream quietly when the wedge takes your fingernail. Now you'll learn something even more important: how to suffer properly. Because technique might keep you alive, but only if the men above you allow it. They watch everything, from raised platforms shaded by thin cloth canopies or carved into the scaffolding like parasites with clipboards. The overseers oversee exactly what their title promises. Every rope pull, every missed step, every grunt of hesitation is catalogued somewhere behind their sun-hardened eyes. You don't know their names, and they certainly don't know yours. You are mass movement, output. They don't see people. They see friction and how to reduce it. And if a man's suffering increases efficiency, then so be it. The machine must keep turning. There's a difference between the cruel ones and the efficient ones, but it barely matters. The cruel ones beat you because they enjoy it, because your pain makes them feel large in a world built on other men's backs. The efficient ones do it because it works, because you'll pull harder with bruised ribs, because you'll move faster when your friend is bleeding beside you. You start to learn which kind you've got by how they hold the whip. Loose grip, smiling. Cruel, tight grip, blank face, efficient. Either way, you're getting hit. The first time it happens, it surprises you. Not the pain, but how little it takes to deserve it. You trip over a coil of rope left near the base of the ramp. You don't fall, but you stumble, slowing your team by 3 seconds. That's enough. The strike lands across your shoulder, hot and sharp, and you gasp more from shock than injury. You glance back, half expecting an explanation. None comes. The overseer is already walking away. You were a variable. The variable was corrected. You learn not to look back again. Some men cry out when they're struck. Others stay silent. The smart ones, if there's such a thing, learn to say, "Thank you." It doesn't stop the next blow, but it smooths the moment, makes it pass faster. It tells the overseer that you've accepted your place, that you know your role in the pyramid's digestive system. Resistance isn't punished harder, it's just ignored. You could fight back in theory, but there are 10 others waiting to take your spot, and some of them are desperate enough to do it for less beer and more pain. The whip isn't the only tool of enforcement. There are sticks, stones, ropes used for binding instead of hauling. You've seen men tied to the scaffolding in the sun for hours, their backs exposed and blistering. You've seen one forced to work with a dislocated shoulder until the bone tore through the skin. No one intervened. Intervening implies a moral framework. There is none. There's just output, and the minimum suffering required to produce it. Punishment isn't always physical. Sometimes it's subtraction. You get less food, less water, less sleep. You're assigned to a worse post, a heavier load, a steeper ramp. You're paired with a weaker team so that you carry more. Sometimes they take your tools away, and you're expected to work with your hands. Your calluses rip open. Your nails crack and peel. You bleed onto the stone and wipe it away before it draws attention. Blood means weakness. Weakness means liability. And liability is best resolved by absence. You start to develop a sixth sense for their presence. You feel them watching, even when you can't see them. The sudden silence that spreads like oil when one approaches. The way conversations taper off mid-sentence. The way shoulders straighten, grips tighten, postures shift. It's not fear, not exactly. It's survival. A shared instinct honed by countless repetitions of pain and correction. You perform for them, not because you want approval, but because you know what happens when you don't. You've heard whispers, quiet, breathless rumours that some of them were once like you. Labourers, conscripts, broken men who clawed their way up the pyramid by stepping on others. You don't know if it's true. You don't care. If anything, it makes it worse. The idea that someone could live through this and choose to inflict it again speaks to a kind of spiritual rot you can't wrap your head around. It's easier to think of them as a different species, something bred for command, for cruelty, for making the impossible happen, one corpse at a time. There are moments, brief and nauseating, when you almost admire them, not as people, as functions. Their detachment is flawless, their efficiency impeccable. They maintain order in a place where disorder would mean chaos, collapse, and death. They keep the pyramid growing. And as much as you hate them, you recognize the necessity. If no one watched, no one would move. If no one punished, no one would pull. The system doesn't run on discipline. It runs on fear, and fear requires a face. They don't sleep here. The overseers have their own quarters, elevated, separate, clean. You catch glimpses of them in the evenings, drinking real wine, eating better bread, laughing without coughing. Their sandals are intact, their tunics are white. Their bodies aren't carved by sun and rope, but softened by shade and authority. You wonder what it feels like to bathe every day, to eat without flies, to speak without being interrupted by someone else's pain. Then you stop wondering. It doesn't help. The men you work beside start to mirror them. Not in power, but in silence. You all learn to keep your heads down, your mouth shut, your pain hidden. You nod when corrected. You flinch before the blow lands. You internalize the rhythm of punishment until it becomes part of how you move. You tell yourself it's temporary, that you're just getting through it. But eventually, you realize you haven't smiled in weeks, unless it was to deflect a fist. You haven't spoken freely in months. You've become what they need you to be. Compliant, quiet, exhausted, useful. One night, you find yourself dreaming about the overseer who whipped you, not in a nightmare, not in revenge, just dreaming. He's standing above you, saying something you can't hear. His mouth moves like a god giving instructions. You wake up drenched in sweat, half choked by your own breath, and realize you'd rather dream about being punished than dream about home. At least punishment makes sense. There are no second chances here. If you fall, slow down, complain, or falter, You will be corrected. If you're lucky, you'll survive it. If you're not, you'll become another mark on a tablet, another warning to those still breathing. You learn to smile while bleeding. You learn to say thank you when struck. Not because you mean it, but because it's easier that way. The sun doesn't rise here. It arrives, sudden and violent, like a curse shouted by the sky. There's no gentle warmth, no golden glow, no bird song to mark the morning. There's just pressure. A weight that settles on your chest before your eyes even open, thick and immovable, like a second body lying on top of you. It doesn't feel like heat at first. It feels like breathlessness. You wake up already sweating, already aching, and already wondering how long it'll be before the dizziness starts. By the time you reach the work site, your tunic is soaked through, not damp, soaked. It clings to your back like wet bark, every seam chafing raw against skin, already rubbed thin from the day before. You'd remove it, but bare skin burns faster, and the overseers don't like seeing ribs unless they've broken them. So you keep it on, and the salt from your sweat forms crusty ridges along the fabric, stiffening it into something closer to armour, if armour could blister you. The flies are everywhere, not like back home, where they hovered in summer and vanished with dusk. These ones live here, thrive here. They drink your sweat, crawl into your ears, lay eggs in the wounds of slower men. You swat them at first, but there are too many, and they come back faster than you can kill them. Eventually, you stop bothering. You let them land, let them drink, let them crawl. You fall asleep with them on your face and wake up with them in your mouth. You spit them out without thinking. One day, you cough and something wriggles. You don't check to see what it was, so you piss in trenches if you make it there in time. If not, you find a rock, a corner, a spot already dark with use. No one cares. The camp reeks of ammonia and old meat, and your contribution is a drop in the bucket. Diarrhea becomes a regular companion. Not sudden or alarming, just persistent. Like a leaky jar you've given up trying to fix. You lose weight, you gain headaches, your stomach growls constantly, but nothing you eat stays long. The beer helps a little, numbs the worst of it. But beer doesn't stop the cramps that hit mid-haul. The hot, wet shame running down your leg as you keep pulling a block uphill. The overseers don't stop for accidents. You're expected to keep moving, no matter what leaks out of you. Your nose bleeds twice a day now. The first time it happens, you panic, thinking something's torn inside you, but the blood is thin, dark and slow, more ooze than gush. It drips down your upper lip while you work, pooling at the corner of your mouth, mixing with sweat, dust, and fly feet. You don't wipe it anymore. What's the point? Your hands are never clean, and the blood will be back within the hour. Some men shove linen up their nostrils to plug the leak. Others just let it run. You're in the latter group. It's easier that way. The sand is a constant grind. It's not soft, it's sharp. Tiny blades that find the cracks in your skin and dig deeper with every motion. It gets under your fingernails, between your toes, in the folds of your joints. It mixes with sweat and forms a gritty paste that scours your thighs raw. You itch constantly, and scratching only makes it worse. You try rinsing off when the water is available, but the relief lasts 5 minutes at most. Then the wind shifts, and you're coated again. By midday, your arms are striped with red, where the grit has chewed through your outer layers. You bleed in lines like someone carved you up and got bored halfway through. There's no wind to speak of, only the occasional breeze that feels like someone exhaling into your face after chewing on charcoal. It's hot, dry, and somehow still manages to carry more dust. The air is thick with it, and by afternoon your lungs feel like they've been filled with powdered stone. You cough often, short barking fits that rattle your ribs and sometimes bring up black clumps. You hope it's just dirt. You hope it's not something worse. You don't ask. You keep coughing. Your skin begins to change. At first it tans, then it peels, then it cracks. The sun doesn't just burn, it cooks. The tops of your ears split open. The back of your neck blisters and pops. You wrap cloth around it, but it gets soaked with sweat and sticks. When you pull it off at night, it takes skin with it. Your lips chap and split down the centre. You chew on them out of habit, even though it hurts, because it's something to do, some distraction from the heat pounding into your skull like a drum made of bone. Every day the ramp gets steeper. You're not sure how. It's like the stones are breeding while you sleep, multiplying when no one's looking. The incline burns your calves, strains your knees, and every step feels like pushing your spine through a grinder. You lean forward and grunt with each haul. The sun in your eyes, the taste of bile in your throat. The salt on your skin draws more flies. They bite now, or sting. You're not sure, you just know it hurts. Sleep is useless. The heat doesn't leave at night. It just becomes darkness with a temperature. You lie on your mat, soaked and sticky, the stink of other men thick around you, your ears ringing from a dehydration. You try not to move. Movement makes you sweat, and sweating makes you itch. You lie there, breathing shallowly, praying for morning, not because you want to wake up, but because at least it means the night is over. At least it means time is still moving, even if you wish it weren't. Sometimes you think about rain, not because you expect it. It hasn't rained since you arrived, but you remember it vaguely. The sound of it on your roof, the feel of it on your scalp. You try to conjure it like a spell, like a memory strong enough to cool your body from the inside out. But it never works. The heat always wins, the sun always rises, and the flies are always waiting. The ramp still rises, the stone still moves, and your body, fragile and failing, is expected to keep up with both. The environment is not your enemy, it's your employer. It disciplines without emotion, wounds without purpose, and never tires. You were born into it. Now you live in it. And someday soon, if you're lucky, you'll rot into it. You notice a horrible reality about your fellow workers. They die beside you. Quietly, loudly, suddenly, slowly. Death comes in all speeds and volumes here. One moment they're dragging a block, sweating and cursing like the rest of you. The next, they're gone. Sometimes it's a sharp scream followed by a crunch, the sound of bone and mass colliding. Other times, it's a slump, a slow tilt forward into the dust, body folding in on itself, like a sack of wet grain. You don't always notice right away. You're often too busy pulling rope or breathing through nausea to realise the man next to you hasn't moved in 10 minutes. By the time you check, his lips are blue and his hands are cold. You feel a vague guilt, but mostly you feel relief that it wasn't you. Crushed is common. The blocks don't care how careful you are. One bad angle, one uneven roller, one gust of wind at the wrong time, and a 3-ton slab becomes a judgment. You've seen it happen. You've heard the sound, a hollow, wet snap that doesn't stop with the first hit. The overseers don't stop the work. They signal for others to come move the body, or what's left of it, off the ramp. If it's too messy to drag, they push the stone a little farther and let it roll. By the time it's in place, the blood's already drying, and the man beneath it has become part of the foundation. Some die of heat stroke. They just stop sweating. Their faces go pale, their eyes glaze over, and their mouths hang open like broken hinges. You'd think it would be obvious, but it isn't. Plenty of men stumble, plenty shake. The signs blur when everyone looks like they're dying. Then one drops and doesn't get back up. His skin is hot to the touch, his pulse barely there. If he's lucky, someone pours water over him. If not, he's left in the sun until he either wakes or rots. Usually, it's the second one. You've stepped over too many sun-baked corpses to pretend it still feels strange. Infection takes the slower ones, the ones with old wounds that never quite healed, the ones who kept picking at their blisters or scratched through the rash on their thighs or let the flies nest too long in a cut. One day they're limping, the next they're coughing blood or raving about gods. Fever hits hard and fast. Men who are solid as stone go soft in hours. They sweat through their beds, moan all night, and lose track of where they are. Then they stop moaning. Someone checks for breath. If they're still alive, they're carried outside the tent and left in the shade. If they're not, they're dragged to the edge of the camp, dumped in the trench, and covered with just enough sand to keep the smell manageable. No one's buried properly. There are no funerals, no last rites. The priests don't come here. This isn't holy ground. It's a work site, a machine. And machines don't pause to mourn a broken part. The most you get is a grunt from a man who vaguely remembers your face, or a nod from a teammate who'll be dragging your share of the block tomorrow. The replacements arrive quickly. Fresh bodies, blank eyes, hands that haven't yet learned what blisters become. They take your spot, grip your rope, eat your ration, sleep in your place. After a while, you forget who came before them. Sometimes, you catch yourself staring at a corpse too long, not out of grief, out of curiosity. What broke first? Was it the heart? The lungs? Did he fall wrong, or just stop trying? You think about what it would feel like to collapse in the middle of the ramp, to finally give in, to let the stone roll over your legs and end the guessing game. But then you blink, adjust your grip, and keep walking. You don't have time for questions. You only have time to avoid becoming the next answer. There are men you remember at first, a particular laugh, a habit of humming while hauling, a face that looked less miserable than most. You notice when they disappear. You even ask about it, once or twice, but no one answers. Either they don't know or they don't care. You stop asking eventually. Asking implies there's a reason to know. But names are useless here. They don't buy you anything. They don't save you. They don't keep the stone from slipping. You've started noticing how the dead look different from the living, more peaceful somehow. Not in a poetic way, just empty. The tension leaves their faces, their bodies slacken. They're no longer clenched around pain or braced against the next blow. The suffering stops, and in this place, that's the only mercy left. You envy them. You won't admit it aloud, not even to yourself. But it's there, buried under the grit and salt and rope burns. A tiny whisper that says, at least they're done. There's a body near the latrines today. No one knows how long it's been there. The face is swollen, unrecognisable. The flies have already claimed it. You step around it and keep moving. You don't report it. You don't slow down. If it's still there tomorrow, maybe someone will deal with it. Maybe not. You'll be too tired to check. Your dreams are full of corpses now. They appear in familiar places. Your old home, the riverbank, the field you once ploughed. You try to speak to them, but they just stare. You wake up unsure whether you're alive or just one of them waiting to be noticed. The boundary blurs when the pain becomes constant, when the rot sets into your joints and your breath comes short and shallow. You stop thinking in terms of if I die, it becomes when and how and will anyone even notice? And the answer, most days, is no. No one's writing your name down. No one's chiseling your story into a wall. You won't be entombed in gold or praised in a hymn. You'll die where you stand, or kneel, or fall. You'll be covered in dust, dragged to the edge, and replaced before your sweat has dried. You're not building history, you're building a tomb, and someday soon, you'll be inside it. They tell you your work is sacred, that every block you drag, every ramp you ascend, every inch of skin you leave behind on a fraying rope is part of something holy. Not just a building, not just a tomb, but a ladder to eternity. A monument for a God who walks in flesh, bleeds only metaphorically, and will live forever. Thanks, in no small part, to the effort of men like you who definitely won't. The priests say that Pharaoh is divine, that his soul will rise to the heavens on wings carved from limestone and devotion. Meanwhile, you spend your days coughing blood into the sand and wiping flies from your open sores, hoping your soul doesn't ooze out along with everything else. You try to believe it, not because it feels true, but because it's something to hold on to, a purpose, a story. If this is just cruelty for its own sake, then what's the point? Better to think of it as meaning, a great cycle. The living serve the dead so the dead can become eternal. And maybe, just maybe, some sliver of that immortality reflects back onto the hands that built it. That's what they promise, that your suffering isn't wasted, that your blood is ink in the scroll of time. But deep down, you know better. You've seen the difference. You've seen the priests in their fine linens, strolling through camp with soft feet and full bellies. You've watched the foreman bow to them. You've seen their hands, clean, pink, unbroken. They speak of gods, but they serve men. Men who wear gold, who sleep in shade, who will be buried with treasures you wouldn't be allowed to touch while breathing. You're told Pharaoh will be entombed with furniture, food, gems, perfumes, and enough grain to feed a village. Meanwhile, you're lucky if your next ration of bread hasn't gone mouldy. He will rest in polished stone. You will dissolve into dirt somewhere anonymous, trampled by tomorrow's labour shift. They call it a pyramid. You call it a mausoleum, a monument to hierarchy. Every layer says the same thing. One man's afterlife is worth the lives of 10,000 others. The irony is sharp enough to draw blood. You're not building a symbol of peace or prosperity. You're constructing a weapon of memory, something designed to scream across the ages that Pharaoh mattered, and you didn't. It's working. Every day the walls climb higher. Every block rises while your body sinks. Sometimes you wonder what he was like, this man you're slowly dying for. Not the god king, not the painted face on a temple wall, but the person. Did he smile? Did he weep? Did he ever lift anything heavier than a cup? You'll never know. He doesn't live here. He never did. He never saw the mud trenches or the lice swarms or the men convulsing from heat stroke in their own waste. His name is sung in temples. Yours is shouted when you fall behind. And yet, you still catch yourself daydreaming. Not about Pharaoh, but about leaving. About finishing the work, collecting your promised reward, however meagre, and walking away from all of this. Back to your family, your farm, your river. You imagine stepping off the ramp for the last time, laughing at the absurdity of it, wiping your hands on your tunic, and saying something clever to whoever's nearby. But that's the dream. That's the bait. The reality is that no one finishes this job. You work until you collapse. Then someone else takes your place. If you're lucky, they remember your face for a few days before it blurs into the general outline of the guy who used to sleep near the tent pole. Every now and then a priest visits the site to bless the progress. He lifts his arms, chants something incomprehensible, sprinkles water or ash or perfumed oil, and then disappears into a shaded litter borne by slaves who, at least for the moment, aren't you. The overseers straighten up during these visits. They act reverent, deferential. You've even seen one wash his hands. It's the only time you ever see them pretend to care about something other than speed and stone. You try to watch the ritual, but it feels hollow, like watching someone bless a spear before stabbing you with it. The words don't matter. The work continues. One evening, after the sun's finally sunk and your hands are trembling too hard to eat, you overhear a conversation between two older workers. They're talking about the last pharaoh, how his pyramid was supposed to be grander, but funding ran out and the workers revolted. You ask what happened. One shrugs. The other says, they were all buried under it. You're not sure if he means metaphorically or literally. Either way, it sounds about right. You've stopped trying to keep track of the progress. The walls grow, the ramps shift, the shadows stretch across more of the desert every week. You don't celebrate milestones. There are no days off, no feast days for the labourers. There are celebrations, yes, but they're not for you. They happen up the slope, in the chambers meant to house Pharaoh's soul. When the capstone is finally hauled into place, if it ever is, you doubt you'll be alive to see it, but someone will stand there and say it was all worth it. That's the lie they build faster than the pyramid itself, that this is for something, that the sweat and blood and shattered bones are bricks in a moral edifice, that your suffering purchases someone else's eternity. You want to believe it, but every time you pass the edge of the worker trench, where the nameless dead are stacked and sanded over, the truth returns. You're not a disciple, You're not a servant of the divine. You're not even a labourer. You're fuel, and the fire you're feeding burns in the shape of a god's tomb. Your fingers no longer bend properly. The joints have swollen into stiff knobs, knotted like tree roots, and your grip now comes from the wrist down, blunt, clumsy, and unreliable. Some mornings you wake with your hands curled into claws, unable to open them until you've soaked them in warm beer or beaten them against a stone. It doesn't help much. You drop your chisel more often now. You tell yourself it's because the handle is slick with sweat, but deep down, you know your hands are forgetting how to hold things. The body has a limit. You've been pressing it for weeks. Now it's pressing back. Your vision blurs at intervals, as though the world is slipping sideways without your permission. Sometimes the sun leaves trails when you blink, smearing the sky into bright streaks that make your stomach roll. On other days you see fine, too fine. Every fly wing, every drop of sweat, every crack in the stone becomes painfully clear. It's not clarity, it's overstimulation, and it makes your head pound like someone is trying to chisel through your skull from the inside. You drink more water, you drink more beer, neither fixes it. You're not dehydrated, you're unravelling. Your back no longer screams, it roars, a steady, throbbing ache that rises from your spine like smoke and settles in the base of your neck. You can't lift your arms above your shoulders without something cracking. You've developed a limp in one leg, not from an injury, just from imbalance. Your left side does more of the work now. You lean into the pain until the pain becomes posture. You've watched older men shuffle like broken puppets, bent forward, dragging one foot behind them. You used to pity them. Now you're mimicking them. You wonder how much longer you have before someone notices and replaces you with a younger back. The others are faring no better. You see it in their eyes. Not just exhaustion, something deeper, something hollow. Some have started to talk to themselves. One man whispers into the sand as he works, like he's dictating secrets to the earth. Another has taken to drawing pictures in the dust. Shapes, symbols, faces. You asked him once what they meant. He didn't answer, just smiled with cracked lips and kept sketching. He doesn't speak anymore, not to people. He talks to stones now. Sometimes they talk back. You don't ask what they say. Laughter has become common, though it's not the kind that lifts spirits. It's sharp and sudden, the sound of something snapping in half and enjoying it. A man hauling rope beside you giggled for an hour straight last week. Nothing funny happened. He just laughed, eyes wide, foam gathering at the corners of his mouth. No one told him to stop. It seemed safer to let it play out. Eventually, he passed out mid-chuckle. When he woke up, he didn't remember it, or pretended not to. Either way, he hasn't spoken since. You don't find it strange anymore. You envy them, in a quiet, shameful way. Madness feels like a kind of escape, a loophole in the system. The men who lose their grip no longer wince at pain or hesitate when pulling. They don't flinch at the overseer's whip or cry out when a fingernail comes off with a rope. They keep moving, faces slack, eyes empty, bodies bent and bloodied but somehow freer. The part of them that could still suffer is gone. You wonder what it takes to reach that point. You wonder if you're close. You try to hold on to your routines. Fold your tunic a certain way before sleeping. Count to 20 between bites of bread. Drink from the same corner of your bowl each time. These things keep you tethered. You tell yourself they matter, that they're proof you're still sane. But the routines get harder to remember. Some days you catch yourself staring at a block of stone for so long, it feels like it's watching you back. You blink and the sun has moved. You don't recall what you were thinking. You just feel cold despite the heat, like something important slipped out of your mind and never came back. The dreams don't help. You used to dream of home, faces, voices, rivers. Now you dream of the ramp. Always the ramp. You're hauling a block that never moves, with ropes that grow tighter the harder you pull. The sand rises over your feet, then your knees, then your chest. You scream. But your mouth fills with flies, you wake up chewing. You spit out grit and hope it's just dirt. You're never sure anymore. Injuries go unnoticed until they can't be. You step wrong on a loose roller and twist your ankle. It swells. You wrap it with dirty cloth and keep walking. Someone slices his palm on a chisel. He rinses it in beer and ties it with the hem of his tunic. There's no time for healing. If you stop, you lose your place. If you lose your place, you might not come back. Rest is dangerous. It breeds weakness. You don't even sit down unless ordered. You just lean against walls, hands on knees, head between your arms, praying the dizziness passes before the next haul. The overseers don't ask questions. If you're standing, you're working. If you're not, they assume you've made a choice. And in a way, maybe you have. You've chosen to keep pretending, to keep walking, to keep pretending your fingers still work. Your back isn't on fire. Your thoughts aren't slipping sideways. You smile when they call your name. You laugh when the whip cracks near your feet. You play the part. It's easier than explaining how much of you's already gone. Some men do break. Not mentally, not at first. Physically. Their bodies stop cooperating. A shoulder locks. A hand refuses to grip. A leg gives out on the ramp and refuses to rise. Those men disappear. No one says where. You hear things, of course. Sent home, sent to the pits, sent to the Nile. You don't ask. If you're lucky, you'll break cleanly and early. If not, you'll keep limping until someone notices the stench of your infection and decides you're not worth the space you're taking up. And through it all, the pyramid keeps growing. The blocks rise, the ramps shift, the tools change hands. Your body continues its slow rebellion, your mind unspooling like thread in a windstorm. You tell yourself you're holding together, but every day you envy the ones who aren't. You don't get a farewell. There's no final sunrise framed by golden stone, no quiet moment of reflection as the wind stirs your sweat-soaked tunic. You wake up the same way. You always do, half choking on the stench of the man beside you, your limbs stiff with dried sweat, and your tongue thick with the taste of old bread and sour beer. You rise because you have to, not because you can. Your legs don't want to hold you. Your back screams. Your hands barely close around the same fraying rope they've gripped every day for longer than you can remember. The difference today is subtle, almost invisible, but it's there. Your body knows what's coming, even if your mind hasn't caught up. The stone you're moving isn't heavier than usual. It doesn't tip or fall or scream. It's just a block, another slab in a long, unbroken line of slabs. But your balance is off. The sun is too sharp. You blink, and it splits into three. And before you can decide which one is real, your foot slips. You stagger. The rope jerks. A voice shouts something behind you, but it's already too late. You hit the ramp hard. Your shoulder crunches against packed earth, and your head rings like a cracked bell. You try to stand, but the world tilts. Your legs refuse. Your arms forget how. The others keep moving. For a moment, you think someone will help. You hear footsteps, feel hands, rough and urgent, patting your chest, maybe checking for breath. A few murmured curses. Someone says something about, "Get another man." Then they're gone. The work resumes. The stone moves on. You lie in the dust, watching it pass you, trailing the same groove you've walked for weeks, maybe months, maybe years. You lose track. You try to sit up. You make it halfway before your vision narrows and the ground swells like a wave. There's something wrong with your chest. It rises too slowly. Your breath whistles. It tastes like copper and dust. Your shoulder pulses in time with your heartbeat, a rhythmic throb that grows weaker with each beat. You close your eyes for a moment, not because you want to sleep, but because the sunlight is too loud. You tell yourself you'll get up in a minute, just one more breath, but you don't get up. No one marks the moment you die. There's no bell, no announcement, no one shouts, "He's gone!" You don't fall in slow motion with arms outstretched. You simply stop being a worker and start being a problem. Later, someone might notice your body at the edge of the ramp and tell a foreman. Maybe they drag you out of the way. Maybe they leave you there until nightfall. If the flies get to you first, they might decide you're not worth touching. If a chisel team sets up near you, they might cover you with sand so you don't distract the others. But no one mourns, no one prays. Your death is not a tragedy. It's a logistical hiccup. Your name isn't recorded. It probably never was. You weren't a mason. You weren't a priest or a foreman or a craftsman of royal blood. You were muscle with a heartbeat, a moving shape with a job, and a rope, and a quota. Whatever name you carried when you arrived has long since been forgotten by everyone here. Maybe even by you. The only place it lives is in the minds of people far away, if they're still alive, if they still remember, if they haven't been told you left and never returned. No tablet will bear your story. No scarab amulet will be placed in your chest. You won't be embalmed or entombed or honoured with ceremony. If they move your body, it will be dumped into the trench with the others, limbs tangled, faces blurred by rot and heat. There are no markers, no rows, just a hole in the desert that swells a little more each day. You'll bake there side by side with men who died the same way, quietly, anonymously, without note or pause. If you're left on the ramp too long, the sun will split your skin and the birds will find your eyes. It won't take long. The vultures here are efficient, like everything else. Work doesn't stop. The stone continues. The block you failed to haul gets there eventually, dragged by someone fresher, someone with fewer broken ribs and less damage behind the eyes. Your spot on the rope is filled before nightfall. Your mat in the sleeping tent is claimed without hesitation. The man who takes it doesn't ask who it belonged to. He just lies down and exhales. The others say nothing. Some might nod, most won't notice at all. In a place where survival is a full-time job, the dead are just noise that's already faded. The next morning, the foreman makes a mark on a tablet. Just a tally, not even a name. Worker lost, a single character etched into clay that doesn't describe how you died, where you fell, or how long you lasted. No one sketches a diagram of the injury. No one measures the angle of impact. You're reduced to a line in a record, kept only for the sake of supply counts. One less ration, one fewer tool. This is how it ends. Not with ceremony, not with thanks. Just a quiet, anonymous absence that barely ripples across the surface of the machine you helped keep alive. You don't make it. Time moves on. It doesn't stop. Not for you, not for anyone who died beside you, not for the thousands of men who were replaced and forgotten just like you were. The sun keeps rising, the sand keeps shifting, and the pyramid, the one that crushed your body and swallowed your name, remains. Long after your bones have been scattered by desert wind, long after the pit that held your body has collapsed into the earth, the stones still stand, perfectly angled, stubbornly unmoved. The monument you bled for has endured in ways you never could. Centuries pass, empires fall, dynasties crumble. The gods you feared are replaced, then forgotten, then rediscovered by scholars who pronounce their names with the wrong vowels. Pharaohs whose names once echoed across the Nile are now museum pieces, their mummified corpses paraded under glass, while children press sticky fingers against the exhibits. The rituals, the rites, the reasons, they all blur with time. But the pyramid? It stays, a shape against the sky, a riddle of stone, a tourist attraction. No one remembers the men who built it. They remember the architect, maybe. The pharaoh, certainly. The theories, oh, the theories, they multiply. Was it aliens? A miracle of lost technology? Slave labour? Skilled craftsmen? There are papers, panels, documentaries narrated in soothing voices, all speculating on how it was done. They ask about ramps, pulleys, angles, mathematics. They measure shadows and alignments, write books filled with diagrams and timelines. But no one asks about the rope burn, the missing fingers, the laughter that turned to screaming, the trench full of nameless corpses that didn't merit even a line on a tablet. Tourists arrive by the busload now. They wear sunglasses and floppy hats. They fan themselves and complain about the heat, the same heat that baked your skin into leather and turned your blood to syrup. They take selfies in front of the very blocks you helped move, smiling with teeth that haven't yet been cracked by malnutrition. Children climb over the lower stones, like playground equipment, their parents shouting warnings, while chewing on packaged snacks. Some of them pause to read the plaques, most don't. Occasionally, someone looks up in awe. They whisper that it must have taken something incredible to build this. They're right. It took pain. It took lives. It took men like you, stacked up like timber and burned out like old oil lamps. But when they say incredible, they don't mean suffering. They mean cleverness, ingenuity. They're admiring the illusion of brilliance, not the weight of 10,000 crushed spines. Somewhere nearby, a guide explains the worker village. They call it organised, advanced for its time. There are remains of bakeries, breweries, tools. They point to the ruins and say, see? They were well fed, respected, volunteers. The tourists nod, comforted. It's easier to believe the story that makes the monument cleaner. No one talks about the trench. No one mentions the bodies dumped there without marker or mourning. Those bones have no voice. They're just part of the sediment now, crushed under the narrative. The pyramid becomes a symbol, a metaphor. It appears on currency, stamps, posters, and souvenir keychains. It's used to sell ideas and products it was never meant to endorse. People stand beneath it and promise their love, vow their allegiance, announce their brands. No one notices the bloodstains in the mortar. You're not history, you're background noise, atmospheric texture, just another ingredient in the myth of eternal glory. In classrooms, they talk about scale and ambition, about the brilliance of Egyptian engineering, about how ahead of their time the builders must have been. Sometimes they mention labour, briefly, almost apologetically. They'll say, of course it was a hard life. Then they move on. They don't linger on the rot, the madness, the grief that never had a name. They certainly don't describe you. Your hands, your cracked lips, your broken body baking in the sun. You're inconvenient, easier to forget. Even in death, you're not done. Your bones, if they survived at all, have long since been ground into the same earth that tourists trample on their way to the next photograph. Your sweat helped shape the ramp they reconstructed for a museum display. Your breath, once ragged and strained, is now just air, recycled through centuries of people who never knew what you endured to give them a backdrop. Your sacrifice is invisible by design. The system that built the pyramid didn't need you remembered. It needed you used. And yet, there it is. The pyramid still stands. Towering, jagged, impossible. It outlasted the men who ordered it, the gods it was built to honour, the empires that rose and fell around it. Your suffering was ground into it, packed between blocks like mortar. You didn't choose to be part of it, but you are, not in name, not in legacy, but in function. It exists because you ceased to. That's the closest you get to immortality. Sometimes a historian will stand at the base and wonder aloud how many people it took. They'll debate it, estimate it, argue over decades, maybe centuries. They'll never know. They don't want to know. Not really, because to know would mean looking past the geometry and into the graves. It would mean admitting that this wonder of the ancient world is less a testament to genius than to endurance, specifically yours. And endurance, as it turns out, is only interesting when it's abstract. There is no plaque with your name, no preserved mat in a museum exhibit labelled labourer's resting place, no ceremony, no reverence, no tribute. But your hands helped lift the stones that are still here. Your blood helped darken the paths that tourists now stroll. You are part of this, even if no one remembers. Not because they forgot, but because they never cared to begin with. The pyramid stands, the story is told, but not yours. You are not part of the history. but you are the reason it happened. That brings us to the end of tonight's story. If you're still awake, thank you for walking that long, sun-bleached path. If you'd like early access to more slow, grim histories like this one, ad-free audio of the episodes, or just want to help keep the metaphorical rope moving, you'll find a link to the Patreon in the description. Feel free to like, subscribe, or leave a comment with other forgotten corners of history you'd like to see unearthed. If you're listening on a podcast app, a rating or review helps others find their way to these stories. And special thanks to the supporters who make this show possible, including our chronicler, Andrew S. Sleep well.